Today on NewsWatch, another huge win for Donald Trump. Now all eyes turn to Super Tuesday. But do his opponents stand a chance? Plus, closing Gitmo. Will President Obama's agenda improve or undermine America's national security in the war on terror? And
there are sexual predators out there that will take advantage of this. The reason why we keep males and females separated is to prevent problems. But now you're saying, oh no, there's no problem.
Parents outraged as the government tries to force schools to bend gender rules for their locker rooms. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Trump is one step closer to the GOP nomination after a big victory in the Nevada caucuses. The fight for second is still between Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. This race continuing to heat up with less than a week to go before Super Tuesday. Caitlin Burke is on this story.
Donald Trump is on a winning streak. Today, celebrating a massive win in Nevada, keeping the strong momentum for his campaign.
We love Nevada. We love Nevada.
The easy victory coming from a combination of love for Trump and anger at the Republican establishment in Washington.
Of course, if you listen to the pundits, we weren't expected to win too much, and now we're winning the country.
The win in the Silver State sets Trump far ahead of his opponents. He claimed nearly 46% of the vote. His closest challengers, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, continue to battle for second, Rubio with around 24% of the vote and Cruz a little over 21%. An important factor in Trump's win? According to CNN, entrance polls showed he was winning among Latino GOP caucus goers. That's even with his campaign's hard line on immigration. The Republican candidates are now turning their attention to Super Tuesday on March 1st, when more than a dozen mostly southern states from Texas to Virginia could give some of the leading candidates a big boost. On the other side, the Democrats are focused on South Carolina, which holds its Democratic primary on Saturday. At a CNN town hall in the Palmetto State Tuesday night, the candidates focused on African Americans, who make up half of the state's electorate.
We must sustain and strengthen the historically black colleges and universities.
Racism, along with economic issues, educational issues, and all the rest, have to be addressed.
Today, Clinton is campaigning in South Carolina, while Sanders heads to Missouri. The Republicans take part in a voters' summit hosted by Megyn Kelly of Fox News, an anchor Trump has had some rough relations with in this campaign season. He declined the event and will instead be appearing at the Regent University Presidential Candidate Forum. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Senate Republicans say they will not vote at all on any nominees to replace Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Republicans on the Judiciary Committee say anyone President Obama nominates will not even get a hearing. They point to a video that shows Vice President Joe Biden back when he headed up the Judiciary Committee in 1992. In that speech, Biden said the Senate should not consider holding hearings until after the election. Republicans agree with Biden, saying any nomination during a presidential election would be flooded with political agendas.
It's up to the American people in this next election, no matter who they choose, to make the nomination for this important seat on the Supreme Court. Justice Scalia served for 30 years, so this clearly extends far beyond President Obama's term of office. It's that important.
Senator John Cornyn said the nominee to replace Scalia will be decided by voters in the November election and not a lame duck president. The president's health care law comes under fire once again, this time for its flaws in rooting out fraud. A new report being released today by the nonpartisan Government Accountability Office finds the Obama administration has taken a passive approach to identifying potential fraud. Investigators say the administration has struggled to resolve eligibility questions affecting millions of initial applications and hundreds of thousands of consumers who were actually approved for benefits. After 7 years in office, President Obama is trying to make good on his 2008 campaign promise to close the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. He says it puts America at risk, but critics say it helps to gather intelligence. And they point out many of the suspects the Obama administration released have rejoined the jihad. White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon has more.
The Guantanamo Bay Detention Center inspires jihadists, hurts America's relationship with her allies, and must be closed. That from President Obama today as he released his much-anticipated plan to close Guantanamo. Senior White House officials say images of Gitmo detainees wearing those orange jumpsuits continue to show up in jihadist recruiting videos, undermining national security. Right now, 91 terrorists are being held at Guantanamo. That's down from nearly 250 when Obama took office. 35 are waiting to be transferred to other countries. 10 are moving through the military commission process. And the rest continue to be reviewed periodically to see if they continue to pose a significant threat to the U.S. The president wants to move the remaining 30 to 60 detainees to U.S. soil. His national security team has identified 13 possible locations, including existing federal prisons and current military bases.
As Americans, we pride ourselves on being a beacon to other nations, a model of the rule of law. But 15 years after 9/11, 15 years after the worst terrorist attack in American history, we're still having to defend the existence of a facility and a process where not a single verdict has been reached in those attacks. Not a single one.
There is some bipartisan support for closing Gitmo. Senator John McCain has been a longtime supporter of the idea. Still, Congress has blocked the administration from moving any detainees to the U.S. President Obama says Americans shouldn't be concerned, though, because American courts have already handled many high-profile terrorism cases, while American prisons are currently holding many terrorists securely.
Terrorists like Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib, who tried to blow up an airplane over Detroit, Faisal Shahzad, who put a car bomb in Times Square, and Zohar Zaniev, who bombed the Boston Marathon. They were all convicted in our Article III courts and are now behind bars here in the United States.
The president is already catching criticism from some groups who say instead of closing Guantanamo Bay, he's simply changing its zip code. Meanwhile, others say closing Guantanamo will keep intelligence officials from questioning captured terrorists because they'll request a lawyer as soon as they're detained. Stay tuned to CBNNews.com as this story continues to unfold. For CBN News, I'm Jennifer Wishon in Washington.
Jennifer, thank you. The owners of an upstate New York wedding venue fined for refusing to host a lesbian wedding now say they will not pursue an appeal in court. Robert and Cynthia Gifford said hosting the wedding violated their Christian beliefs, but a state appeals court in January rejected the Giffords' argument, ordering a $13,000 fine and re-education classes. The Alliance Defending Freedom represented the Giffords. The group says the Giffords are now trying to figure out how to run their business under a legal regime that disregards their convictions. An atheist group has lost its decade-long fight against two Florida-based Christian ministries that help ex-convicts cope with life after prison. The atheists had sued Prisoners of Christ and Lamb of God Ministries. Both received state aid to help fund their successful programs. The organizations provide housing, food, and career counseling to former prisoners. The Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty defended the ministries and said the lawsuit was, quote, meritless. In the end, the court sided with the ministries, calling the lawsuit discriminatory. Thousands of protesters gathered in 40 cities across the country this past weekend to denounce the conviction of a New York City police officer. Many believe the conviction of Peter Liang was racially motivated and unjust. Meng-Fai Lee has more on this story from Washington.
Peter Liang is a 28-year-old Chinese police officer who shot and killed an unarmed man in a stairwell in 2014. Earlier this month, a Kings County jury convicted the New York City cop of manslaughter. Liang's attorney called the decision unprecedented because the fatal bullet bounced off a wall and unintentionally struck the victim who was walking in the stairwell at that time. The prosecution argued although unintentional, Liang was still guilty of manslaughter. The decision not only agitated Liang's family, it also angered the Chinese community members nationwide.
We are here today because we want to support Peter Liang and his family. I read about the case and I was very angry by the result. We as a community want to raise our voices. We believe something must be done to help Liang.
This man joined the protests after praying with his family.
After reading about the young man and praying during the week, I told her last night that I would come down here with her and support the movement.
Liang was a rookie cop who had little training prior to the incident. Liang's attorney believed his lack of experience and a proper training should have been taken into account in this case. The 2014 shooting death came in the midst of the tensions between police and the Chinese community, shortly after the death of African-American Eric Gardner. Police tried to arrest him on Staten Island, and his chokehold death sparked street protests. A grand jury declined to prosecute the white police officers.
Meanwhile, other Asian organizations strongly encouraged local Chinese members to join the protest. Some expressed this is not just about Peter Liang, it's more about reshaping the Chinese image in the United States.
Mr. Zhong Gang Li, director of the New Asian Leaders, believes there are strong biased opinions towards Chinese or Chinese Americans in the U.S. today.
We feel the stereotyping and the bias against Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, because we are caught in the middle of the two superpowers, and it's deep. It's really we need to work together with the mainstream society to deal with.
Chinese Americans quickly took to social media platforms, creating Facebook and Twitter pages to gain more support for Liang. They even created an online petition that people could sign asking the court to reverse the decision against Liang. While Chinese Americans are hoping their protests and petitions will make a difference, Liang's only hope of acquittal may come on appeal. Still, the Chinese community won't stop raising their voices. They want their concerns to be heard, not only for a New York police officer who may have been unjustly convicted, but to gain recognition as a viable community in the United States. Mengfei Li for CBN News, Washington, D.C.
Coming up, transgender agenda. Find out what happens to school districts if they dare oppose the federal government's new bathroom mandate. School districts across the country are scrambling to develop policies for transgender students. That's because the Department of Education now says if they don't allow these students to use the bathroom or locker room of their choice, the districts will lose their federal funding. Heather Sells brings us the story.
I'm speaking on behalf of my daughter, who does not want to be in a locker room with a biological boy.
In suburban Chicago recently, hundreds of parents delivered a strong message to their school board. Keep transgender students out of opposite-sex locker rooms and bathrooms.
There are sexual predators out there that will take advantage of this. The reason why we keep males and females separated is to prevent problems. But now you're saying, oh, no, there's no problem.
If we're not going to separate our bathrooms and locker rooms by anatomy, then what are we going to do? Like, what are we doing?
Action by the Department of Education sparked this meeting and could lead to financial consequences for school districts across the country. The debate centers around Title IX, the 1972 federal law which guarantees equal education benefits for male and female students. 2 years ago, the Department of Ed updated guidelines, saying its non-discrimination clause now applies to gender identity. Illinois' 211 became the first school district it found in violation. Its crime, denying a boy who became a transgender girl access to female bathrooms and locker rooms. The department told the district comply or lose millions in federal funds. Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Matt Sharp says that potential financial loss could cripple school districts. The federal government typically pays them anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 per student each year.
A lot of money, especially for smaller rural school districts that don't have the same tax base. And so for these schools, that federal funding is vital to continue to provide athletic programs and sports and books and lunches and all of the things students need to learn.
Schools are also faced with an open definition of what it means to be transgender.
So schools are left in this very difficult situation of saying, how can we know if this is a student just wanting to gain access to the opposite sex restrooms or a student who genuinely believes they are the gender of the opposite biological sex?
It happened last year at this Gloucester, Virginia high school. A girl who became a transgender boy told administrators that he wanted to use the boys' facilities.
The Gloucester transgender student has changed his name and undergone hormone treatments in order to create a more masculine appearance. He says using the girls' bathroom or even a private bathroom would make him feel like an outcast.
For me, the thought of going into a separate restroom, which might as well have been labeled other, was just far too much to bear.
Some students back in District 211 told CBN News they agree separate is not equal.
If you separate somebody from their peers, you can't call that equality. It's just not fair to them.
People are talking about justice for everyone, privacy for all students. But what about this specific student who has been discriminated against?
But privacy advocates, including many parents, believe separate facilities provide a reasonable compromise. The Christian legal group Alliance Defending Freedom says schools should adopt such policies.
But as an act of compassion and using policies like ours, they're saying, we will give you a private place to change and use the restroom. We are going to accommodate you so that you can have a place at school that's just yours while protecting everyone else.
School choice advocates like Neil McCluskey say while the federal government should protect against discrimination, it should stay out of the transgender debate for now.
There are competing values there. A lot of people are concerned about privacy. A lot of people think that's a moral issue. And it's something that should be debated at the local and state level.
A federal court will soon decide the Virginia case and could set a national precedent. In Illinois, District 211 recently settled with the Department of Ed. It built changing stalls in its locker rooms for transgender students.
They're trying to rewrite Title IX by memo.
It's a defeat for moms Vicki Wilson and Lisa Moran, who have formed a parent group to support separate facilities. They're urging others to get ready and take part in the debate.
This is going to be affecting so many districts. A lady from a neighboring district just came up to me and said, I need help.
It's a social experiment most parents never dreamed would happen, giving students the ability to choose their bathroom and locker room. And with no scientific or legal definition of what it means to be transgender, the new federal policy has left the door open for many difficult, awkward, and potentially abusive situations. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Up next, reprogramming your genes. Sounds like science fiction, but it's reality. Will scientists only use it for good? That's the question when we come back. Scientists from around the world are debating the ethics of a new technique that changes a person at the most fundamental level. They came together not long ago in Washington to discuss this brave new world. As Lori Johnson shows us, we are now entering uncharted territory of changing a person's genetic code.
We hear it every day. It's genetic. People are born with beauty, intelligence, athletic prowess. Also, the potential for severe diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, muscular dystrophy.
But what if a person doesn't have to stick with their genes? What if their genetic code can be changed and passed down to future generations? Scientists say that exact technology now exists.
And it was the subject of a summit in Washington, D.C., drawing scientists from around the world.
It's really important to be clear about what are the positive potential outcomes and where is there risk of going down a pathway that we will at some point perhaps regret.
Similar to cut and paste computer software, the most recently developed method allows scientists to precisely target abnormal genes inside cells, replacing them with healthy ones. It can be used in reproductive cells, sperm, egg, and embryos, and those changes can be passed on to children. And in addition to curing diseases, they can also be used to create so-called designer babies.
Germline editing or changes that might enhance future generations. And in those areas, it's difficult to prevent those experiments from happening, but what you can do as a community is set clear guidelines about what would be an acceptable experiment and what would be an unacceptable experiment, and to not let those people that perform unacceptable biological experiments get away without some form of regulation or punishment.
People start talking about eye color, hair color. Sometimes people start talking about things like memory enhancement or muscle mass and things like that. And I think we really need to be careful about that because, quite frankly, some of that involves very, very complicated science in terms of the numbers of genes that you'd have to manipulate, etc. And at least for now, that's not the game, so to speak. That's not the target. The target really are therapeutic interventions. We're looking to try to make a difference in the lives of people who actually have genetic diseases.
The latest gene editing technology has the potential to be done on a wide scale because now it can be done in most modern laboratories at a low cost. The scientists are hoping that the world will agree on uniform legal and ethical guidelines on this new technology, which has the potential to reduce human suffering, but could also carry with it unintended and unforeseeable consequences. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Time now for your Wednesday's Word, and today's word is faith. If you are living in faith that God is going to do something you want or desperately need, it is important you know this. Faith isn't simply waiting, it's acting and stepping out of your comfort zone. Faith is an action word. The scripture clearly says faith without works is dead. So take action and make this a wonderful Wednesday. That's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can always do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.